Hello ladies and gentlemen, my name is Random Gamer Riven and this is Randomised Gaming's Indie First Impressions, and in this Indie's First Impressions video we will be looking at Profane, which has been developed by the OverPowered Team and has been published by Alternative Software. And it released on Steam last month on the 24th and it's available to buy now. And before I begin, I must disclose that Alternative Software kindly provided us with a Steam key at Randomised Gaming in order to look at and preview the game. However, our opinions and thoughts remain our own. So what is Profane? Well, Profane is a bullet rush boss shooter. And the game itself has a rather wonderfully unique gameplay system in that time is life. So the gameplay of Profane involves you battling 9 separate bosses to defeat an evil that has overshadowed your land. And to do that you must defeat 9 bosses in total. However, what makes Profane so unique is the fact that time, as I said, is life, in that your health bar is actually a time bar, and as you can imagine it's constantly ticking down in every boss fight, so you are given a set amount of time to defeat each boss. However, not only is it life, but it's also currency as well, because you can buy weapons and upgrades, but this will reduce the amount of time you have for each boss, although as many of the weapons and upgrades improve your ability somewhat and increase the damage you do against bosses, there's a risk reward factor. Do you take the extra time and not the extra weapon, or do you take the extra weapons hoping they do more damage to the bosses? And each bosses themselves do seem to have certain weaknesses to certain weapons, so some really are worth taking. What's also unique with Profane is the fact that when you actually run out of time you don't actually die, you just enter final hit mode, which of course means should you take one more hit then it's game over. But it's amazing how well you can actually do on your last hit, and in quite a few occasions I actually defeated the bosses once I'd run out of time, certainly with a bit of practice as you begin to learn the patternized attack patterns of the enemies. So Profane itself is what we describe as a bullet hell shooter, or if you're in Japan, and I'm going to probably pronounce this wrong, but danmaku shooter. Basically what that means is, unlike the early shooters which had a limited number of bullets, bullet hell shooters tend to fire an awful lot of patternized bullets at you, and you need to learn the patterns in order to dodge them. Profane itself is actually incredibly well balanced, and unlike some of the cave shooters which are a little bit random at times and require a bit of luck to finish, Profane largely relies almost entirely on skill, and it's actually quite easy to, once you get to know the bosses, to learn the patterns, to learn how to dodge the moves and to where to evade the bullets. Certainly one thing, unlike other shooters that I've seen, there are a lot of telegraphed and signposted attacks, so you can see the bosses performing the animations for certain attacks and then you know what's going to come out, so that way you can begin to move into an area where you know you're going to be safe or where you've got a good chance to avoid the attack. This is a learning shooter. You won't be able to breeze through it on your first go. You will have to learn all the different patterns, and each of the bosses has a very different theme and feel to it, both in colours and how they attack you. I certainly found some bosses easier than others. I also found there was a lot of variety between each of the bosses, as the tactics you use to defeat one boss may be very different to the tactics you use to defeat another. Added to this, factors like the arena also take a big play. Some bosses are very mobile while others are very static. Some arenas are very limited and can actually damage you, such as having lava all over the floor, or a spiked arena where you can't touch the edge of it. With each of these boss fights playing very differently and different bosses being weak to different weapons, there is of course a shopping mechanic, and this is where the second side of the health system works, in the fact that you can buy weapons and passive abilities. Now, passive abilities don't actually cost you any time, and you can take up to 4 into any given arena in the story mode. There is additional challenges mode which add in new passive abilities and also subtract them as well, the same with the weapons. But in the basic storyline you're given a preset number of abilities and weapons, and it's up to you whether you want to make the game easier or harder. Do you take the additional weapons and passive abilities, making the game a bit easier but taking away some of the time you need to fight the boss, or do you just brave the boss fight alone with just your basic weapon and nothing else? This system is actually great for both beginners and veteran gamers alike, as beginners can use the weapons to help ease some of the boss fights. Certainly once you figure out what each boss is weak to, some of the bosses can be defeated very, very easily and very quickly. Whereas if you fancy a challenge and just want to really test your skill and experience with the enemy boss bullet patterns, you can literally just take no abilities and go in with only your gameplay skill alone to defeat the boss, making for some very challenging gameplay. Once you've defeated the story mode, and the story mode does limit the number of abilities and weapons actually in it, you can unlock arena mode, and this gives you an additional set of weapons and passive abilities and unlocks everything from the get-go. Plus you can choose to practice on any boss in the arena mode, allowing you to fight them in any order you so do with. So if you want to get revenge on the second boss because you found him an absolute pain to beat, then now you can do is you can equip any weapon under the sun to blast him to Kingdom Come. There's also a daily challenge mode where you get to fight set bosses with a preset number of weapons, and you only get one shot at this. Should you fail the daily challenge, well, you won't get to try again till the next day with a new challenge. There's also a basic challenge mode which gives you a set playthrough with a predetermined criteria, whether it be reducing the number of passives, reducing the time, or changing factors such as the amount of energy the bosses drop for your sub-weapons. And speaking of sub-weapons, I should just explain that the weapons themselves, once you buy additional weapons, have to be powered up. Now each weapon has a preset power criteria, so some have 3, some have 2, some have 4, some have 5, and basically you need to collect that many number of corresponding power orbs that are dropped by the bosses when you shoot them. Once you fill up the bar, then you can use that weapon and it resets back to 0, and you need to power up the orbs again. If you're very good with the weapon usage, you can actually continue to farm the enemies very effectively to almost continually use the weapons, and there are passives that increase the number of orbs dropped and even double up the orbs, so that way you'll get orbs that are worth 2 points instead of just 1. Meaning experienced player with the right setup can constantly fire sub-weapons almost the whole time against bosses. As a bullet hell shooter, I actually found this to be very enjoyable. The balancing in Profane is extremely good. The patterns are, while initially daunting at first, once you get to grips with them, very, very reasonable. And unlike cave shooters, which can be overly brutal at times and sometimes often rely on sheer luck as well, yes, not all cave shooters are entirely patternized. They do have an element of random luck, which kind of spoils the fun. I found this to be almost flawless. Some bosses, certainly when I got to the 6th boss, it was initially quite daunting at first, but once I begun to learn the patterns and how the boss works and which weapons it was strong and weak to, I was able to defeat it very quickly in the story mode, and certainly there was quite a sense of achievement, and also there's a one more go factor. The fact you aren't killed instantly when you run out of time is also very beneficial, because you do feel like you're making it progress. You would often find, you know, the first couple of goes you wouldn't even get off the boss's first form, then you'd get to the second form, quickly you'd find yourself beating the second form, and then occasionally you might find you're nearly the end of the third form, you get killed, but then you try again and finally beat it. There is a very much a one more go feel with this one. I found it very, very compelling, that I found it very hard to put down. Once you've got to a boss, you just wanted to keep fighting it till you beat it. Animation is lovely, as are the bright, bold colours used in game. Each boss has a very different visual theme in how they use colour, and bullets are very clearly drawn and coloured, so it's easy to differentiate them from the background, which is another hallmark of a very good shooter. For a European-made shooter, OverPowered Team are actually based in Madrid, Spain. This is incredibly well put together and easily gives all the best Japanese danmaku developers or bullet shooters a run for their money. This is a fantastic game. I found it highly enjoyable. Some people will draw comparisons with the 2016 title Fury, no doubt, and certainly if you liked Fury, you will almost certainly like this. There's also some great music to accompany the game, although initially I found the default settings had the music far too quiet. I had to turn it up a lot to actually hear it, but once I could listen to it, some of it was actually used to quite good effect. Certainly on the second boss, But I noticed when you got to the final part of the second boss, the tempo started to ramp up, and there were some subtleties like that in the music that were really very good. I must admit, overall I found Profane to be a very well made game, very enjoyable. I found it very compelling, and once I started it I just had to keep going till I finished it. It took me a couple of days to beat all the bosses, but once I did I was very satisfied. The fact to unlock the arena mode once you finished it's a really nice touch. Although a couple of people I did see grumble why the story mode had some of the passive abilities limited, although I think that's perhaps because some of the weapons and abilities used in the story mode were the ones best designed to defeat some of the bosses. One slight gripe I had was the final form of the last boss, which I haven't actually shown in the footage here. His final pattern attacks weren't that patternized. There was a bit of luck with where they were and how they were attacking you. So I felt obviously the very final form of the final boss did feel a little bit like it was just you had to go all guns blazing out on him to kill him as quickly as possible before he killed you, which ironically is something similar to what Cave actually do, where some of their final bosses literally throw the patterns out the window and it's purely defeat them before they defeat you. There are, I believe, 2 endings. I got one of them, but there is an achievement for a second ending. Not sure how you unlock that. The challenge and arena modes are some great extras designed to keep you coming back for more once you finish the story. It would have been nice if there were a few more bosses in the story, I felt, and perhaps if there had been some alternative routes and different bosses to battle. Now I don't know if there's any hidden or secret boss battles, as I wasn't able to finish the game in one credit, but certainly I would hope there would be some in this type of game. I suspect there probably isn't, but I don't know entirely for sure when I'm commentating on this. But I do feel there could have been nice if there were a few extras and hidden bosses and such. And as I said, alternative routes would have been great with additional bosses. 9's a nice number. I think I would have preferred something like 12 and 13 though in terms of additional bosses. But who knows, maybe we'll see a few more additional bosses as DLC and extra content for Profane. Overall, this is a very, very slickly made, well put together, well playing, great sound, great music. I cannot fault it. Great visuals, great graphics. It's just a superbly crafted, well put together title that's sold at a very reasonable price. I cannot recommend it enough. If you like the genre, if you like this type of shooting genre, if you like boss rush games, this will be the perfect title for you this Christmas. It's available now on Steam and it is priced in the UK $14.99. In Europe it is €15.99. In the US it's $18.99, and if you're coming to us from the land of the rising sun, that is Japan, it will be 1,950 yen. So that leaves me to say I have been your host Random Gamer Riven for this video, and as always, if you like this video please do hit that like button. If you enjoy our content, please do hit the subscribe button. And finally, if you want to be notified of every upload we do, please do hit that bell notification button as well. Thank you for watching, ladies and gentlemen. Good night for now.